Over time, as you're using Acumatica, you might develop a large backlog, if you will, of old completed, what Acumatica calls documents. Those could be purchase orders, sales orders, and things like that. And up till now, Acumatica didn't really have a way of getting those out of the way of your users, meaning over time, as we run searches for sales orders or other documents, things tend to slow down, or it's hard to get down to the exact ones that you want. So with this new archiving feature, Acumatica will let you choose to hide those, if you will, from the users. It doesn't delete them from the database. You can still get to them, and I'll show you how that works. It should improve performance and improve the user experience. So let's go take a look at that, and then we'll come back to that second one. So here's my Acumatica screen. And the first place that a system admin would come to set this up is called the new archival policy screen. This is one of a couple of new screens in 2023 R1. You can see here, I've got a typical Acumatica grid. And in this case, I have a sales order set up on this grid because I want to archive sales orders over time. And next to that, I can set what's called a retention period. So here in my demo company, I've set up a 104-month retention period because it matches the demo data that I'm using. But your company, depending on who you are and where you are, might have a different policy where you need to retain things for a certain amount of time, and you can set your own right there. I'm going to go ahead and click the plus sign and add a second one. And notice here, I only have 2 document types. As you saw on the slide before, Acumatica is implementing this in a controlled manner where they're just doing this for now for these 2 document types. And Acumatica does this, if you've been around a little while, they'll roll something out and kind of watch and analyze the impact for how that works for folks, and then they'll build on it over time. And I believe that's what they're doing here. So now, in addition to archiving my sales orders, I'm also saying that I want to archive my shipments at 104 months. So this is kind of a set it and forget it screen, if you will. I set this up and I kind of leave it alone, and it does its own thing. Just also take note of this archive process duration. I'm going to talk about that here on the next screen in a second. So now that I have my retention policy set up, I'm going to come over to my archive documents screen. This is where the actual archiving process happens. There's a little more going on here where you can see I have a list of dates and then a list of documents here summarized. Now notice I only have a column for sales orders because I had this screen loaded before I added the shipments in the prior screen. But if I refresh this, now you can see I have a shipments column here. And so it's just showing me by date, it's calculating based on my 104-month retention policy, how many documents would be archived as of a given date on the calendar. So I'm going to use this April 26th date as an example here. You can see I have 1 sales order that's set to be archived. And one of the nice things about this feature is that I can drill in, as I'm learning how this works, just to make sure that I trust exactly what it's doing. So you can see here, I have sales order 3098. It's in a completed status. That's important. Acumatica is only going to archive documents that have completed their life cycle, if you will. And it's going to calculate the archive date based on the last modified date. So it's not the order date or anything else. It's the last time that document was touched that makes it qualified to show up on the archive screen. So I'm going to close that window, come back here and say, okay, as a test run, I'm going to archive that document. And let me talk about the test run for a second. The first time you use this as a company, you will probably have a large number here. So you may want to step through them either manually, as I'm about to show you, or in a controlled manner. And that's where this duration field I mentioned comes into play, where if you have a very large number of documents, it could take a long time to run. So you may want to do something like start it at 10 or 11 at night, let it run for 5 or 6 hours, and then it'll stop itself before your users come in the morning. And that way you won't impact their processing, because it will slow down the system a little bit while it works. In my case, I'm just going to use this one on April 26th. I click process. I'm going to do it manually. And it'll think for a second, and then it should tell me that it archived that document. While it's doing that, let me mention, as with all of Acumatica's processing screens, you have the ability up here to schedule this. So going forward, once you get the initial documents out of the way, you should be able to just set this on a nightly or a weekly schedule, and it should just chop off the oldest ones as your calendar moves forward. There we go. So that one's done. And you can see now that the screen refreshes, it's dropped off the list. So what does that mean in terms of what that looks like inside of my normal user interface? To show that, I'm going to come over here to my regular list of sales orders. So this is the normal sales orders generic inquiry. And you can see I have it pre-filtered to that same sales order. So I did that before I did that archive. And just to show you that if I refresh this screen, it's now gone. So that's the point, that my users don't see that anymore. But what if I need for some reason to get that? Well, if I have a direct link to it from some other document or somewhere else in the system, I can certainly still do that and it'll bring it up. But if I needed to, I could also type that in from the data processing screen for sales orders. So I would just click plus there and type in that sales order number. Hit tab. It's going to think for a second, and that document's going to come up. Just to briefly point out a couple of important points here. Obviously, this doesn't look normal. It gives us this big message at the top that says this record is archived. And those of you familiar with the screen will notice that this icon is new, where it says extract. The point of this is I can always come and look at this if I need to. And as an administrator, or if I have the right rights assigned as a user, I can extract this document. What that'll do is it's going to remove it from the archive and basically put it back in the state that it was a few minutes ago. So now I can reopen the order and I can use it for other things. So again, it's hiding the documents, but they're still available should you need them in the database. Important point for those of you that may be interested in exploring this, there are some technical aspects to this that you want to be aware of. So I advise you to read the release note details on this, or ask anybody here at Algorithm, and we're happy to walk you through some of the details of this feature. Okay, let's move on to the second system admin tip for today. And this is, like I said, a short one, but something a lot of users like, and that is the ability to more easily adjust the user timeout setting in Acumatica. For those of you using Acumatica, sometimes your users will say, hey, I went to make a cup of coffee, I came back, I clicked on a link and I had to log back in. And there is a way in prior versions of Acumatica to change that. If you host your own, you could do it with a web config file, or if Acumatica hosts it, you can submit a support case and they'll take care of it for you. But in 2023 R1, here on the security preferences screen, so again, this is an admin only screen, they've added a new section to allow you to do this right through the user interface itself. There's a new timeout settings section here, and a checkbox and a drop-down box. The default is to say, use the web config value, and that means keep working the way that it's always worked. If I want to take control of that, though, I can uncheck that box, and now I can use this drop-down box to say, hey, I want my users to time out after an hour of no activity, or 6 hours, or whatever I want to choose from that list. Set it, and that should take effect immediately. So that's a nice enhancement just in terms of you as an administrator not having to jump through quite so many hoops to change that setting. One note there, if you want some value other than what's in the list, just recheck that box and you can go set that as you normally would have, like I described a few minutes ago. But either way, just make sure you save the screen and you should be good to go.